What is up, everybody? I have Mr. Eric Barber to my right, and across from us virtually, we're very lucky to have Lydia Smith. Now, Lydia, you do a lot of things. You're an artist, you're an elk guide. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what we're going to talk about today I guess it kind of involves art and elk, and we're talking about crafted impact. And in front of us right now, if you're watching on YouTube, which if you want to see this, you're going to have to be. I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to hold up a limited edition shirt with some phenomenal art on the back that is going to benefit, the proceeds from this shirt are going to benefit the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
All proceeds.
Awesome. Also known as RMEF. So if you're not familiar with the organization and you hear RMEF, that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. But Lydia, welcome. It's awesome having you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This art and this awesome shirt, they don't stand alone. They come with a story.
They do, and a pretty cool one.
What's the story behind the bull pictured in this the back of this pickup here?
So that's a very special bull that I was able to kill last year. One that I had on my cameras for a few years and decided I want to go target him last fall. So September 2021. And it's kind of area where you can't glass. So it's all just, you're hoping he's going to come in. And so lucky enough I hunted him for a solid 10 days. And on day 10, I was able to sneak into him and his cows and harvest him. But he's an incredibly old bull. He had a cataract in one eye, just a sagging old belly, wrinkles on his neck, just a monarch of, the area he was in. And so that's what really intrigued me to get him. And he wasn't the biggest one by any means, but still a very beautiful bull. And so after getting him, it was very surreal to me and all these things. And I took a picture with my iPhone of him sitting in the bed of my truck, my little red S10, little two-wheel drive that got me up from the mountains, and decided to make a little art piece off of it. So it's a very special little drawing, very meaningful one. Probably best and most meaningful hunt I've had since I've started hunting. So pretty dang cool.
That is super cool.
I mean, well, it sounds like, hopefully we're going to have an impact on supporting elk with the shirt, but it sounds like the hunt had an impact on you as well, which is super
Absolutely.
cool. I mean, I guess it would have to be if you're going to inspire you enough, to create a cool piece like this around it. You mentioned trail cams. So I know people definitely use trail cams out west. It's not new, and people definitely use them for elk. But it's also not something you hear about all the time.
Right.
At the same time. So, and it sounds like just the country that this guy was living in. We were like, oh, this is a tactic I'm going to employ to try and find him and get a beat on him a little bit.
Yeah. So very thick country. There's some faces you can glass, but other than that, it's all just you hear a bull and you go after him. So the trail cameras, I love putting them up, not only for art references for my artwork, but just to see them interact, just watching, how they behave, their noises, everything. I love watching them. I can sit and watch even cow elk for hours. And so I really enjoy putting up cameras. And I think I've been putting cameras in this specific spot for 3 or 4 years. And this bull came by, I believe, the second year I had cameras on there, and I noticed him walk by right after he shed his velvet, and you could just tell he's super stinking old. He just walked like he's an old dude. His belly is touching the ground, and I seen that his antlers looked like they were regressing. They just were kind of weird and off, and he had a cataract in his right eye, I believe. And I just thought that was so cool to see him. That is an old bull, oldest bull I have ever gotten on a camera. And personally, I love targeting very mature animals when I hunt. And so that year I didn't kill him. I got this other bull that I absolutely love. And the year after that, I had my cameras in the same spots. And it's actually really funny how it happened. I hadn't checked my cameras all summer. I set them up in June. And I guess the batteries I used on my camera were not good. And so they died out pretty fast. So when I went to go check my camera, I noticed my camera had died. I was like, well, that sucks. I wonder how long it's been dead for. And I believe I checked it in August, and the last pictures taken were July 30th or something. And the last 2 videos on that camera were of him, and he was in full velvet. And I was like, this is insane. I was like, this bull looks so familiar. And I was like, this has to be the same bull. And I go back, sure enough, it's the same one. You can see his, cataract in his eye. And and he just blew up. And it was crazy because we didn't get a ton of, water that year, like not a whole lot of precipitation. And so we were almost in a drought. Yet this bull he came back and he was just tons bigger than what he was the year before. And that's just super weird, especially for a bull that's, old and mature or just aging. And anyways, it just blew my mind. I was just absolutely floored. And so I just thought it was really funny that those were the last two videos that were on there. I was like, right.
It's just like, it's one of those moments that you're just like, was this meant to be a little bit,
Right, exactly.
And the cool thing too, for like anyone that's like listening to this, if they want to kind of get like more of the pictures and all that, we have this on the Vortex Instagram story, like in a highlight, so people can go back, they can check that out, kind of see a little bit more of like the play-by-play, which, I mean, that story, like, it is so cool to kind of see like the raw emotion that kind of comes out in that. Because I know, like, you were solo on this hunt, right? Like, you were all by yourself, and, to kind of, like, cross paths with any bull on a hunt like that is incredibly cool. But one like this, with all that context, is just, like, that's what everyone's dreaming about,
It's just very surreal. Like, I still think about it even, a year later almost, just how cool that, happened. But yeah, it was just super cool getting to see like the last two videos were him. And I was like, right then there, I want to make him my target bull. This bull's old. He's run that herd for years, and maybe it's time for another bull to get up there. But I was just like, man, just something really intrigued me about that bull. I just kept saying that. I was gonna say too, the year before, when I had got a photo of him hard-horned, after I killed my bull that year in 2020, I had left my elk calls up on the mountain where I had killed him. And so I went back up there and heard a bull bugling and got in close to him and got a video of him, and it was him. It was that old bull. And I didn't make the connection until a while later. I got that video that I took of him, and I was calling to him, and he's bugling. He has this very high-pitched bugle. It's very noticeable. And that's one thing that I actually end up looking for, is if I'm targeting a bull and I know what they sound like, that helps immensely in areas that are thick, because you can actually hear like what they sound like, just like people. So that was super cool. I actually got to see him on the hoof chasing cows with a huge herd the year prior to even harvesting him. And I sat there till dark and just watched him and messed with him. Cow called and he bugled back, and just got this one little video, and you can see him walking down the mountain following his cows, and you just see his right side and everything, and like that's the same stinking bull. So and I like did some serious like putting together like photos on top of each other, and it was definitely him. And so that was super cool. And anyways, just like lots of history and kind of emotion and special things behind this bull. So and then I was lucky enough to really hammer it and stay out there for a good 10 days. And actually 3 days before I killed him, I'd actually called him into me in the same exact thicket where I actually ended up shooting him, which I think is hilarious. So I was below him, and it was in the evening, so thermals were coming down, and I had called him from above me, and he came into about probably 30 or 40 yards, give or take. It was so thick you couldn't see anything. Called him in. He decided I shut up because I didn't really want him to know exactly my position. He came in, stopped, didn't hear anything, and he left. Tried calling him back, and he didn't care. And then the same spot where I was standing, where I called him in from, because he was following a trail right above me. There's this trail. And I know that because 3 days later, I was on that same trail and came from above him this time because it was in the morning and the thermals were going up. And he was in the same spot where I was standing 3 days before, where I actually shot him.
Oh, no way.
It's just wild. Yep. Because I had set a waypoint 3 days before where I was sitting. Like, this is where the blind bull is, because I heard him bugle. I'm like, that is him. I know it's him. And then 3 days later, I'm above and I shoot him, and I go down after he runs, and I'm standing right where he was laying down. I look at my maps, and it's right where I set my waypoint.
Holy
3 days
cow.
before.
That's
like
crazy.
It was just bizarre. It was just so weird and crazy to me. I was like, this is not happening. And it just, the whole story just is still mind blowing to me. Because I think that morning, so we had a big storm roll through, and this happens to me almost every year. Like, a giant storm rolls through, like immense amount of rain, trees falling down left and right. So it's just super stressful, like all night. I'm pressing up on the tent, and like had a tree fall right next to me. Like, it was just terrifying. And the next morning, these elk are all, wrestling, bustling. Like, the storm stops. It's like wet out and they're just going crazy. And so I've been following her herd all morning. And I don't know if I'll just go ahead and tell the story, I guess, and you can flip it out. But so it was raining the night before. Next morning it was super foggy, just beautiful. And I was following a herd of elk. And there I was like up on a ridge. And there's a big canyon, and there's actually a hunter in the canyon. And I heard him bugling, and I was like, well, I know that's a person. But I just kept following the herd. We both were. I was up top, he was in the bottom. He ended up stopping, and I ended up kept following these bulls up and over this next draw. And I was like right behind this one bull the whole time. They ended up bedding like right around 9:30 or 10. They all shut up. And so I just kind of sat there. It was beautiful out, just super foggy and just calm. And I ended up hearing some more bugles from behind me, kind of the direction I came from. And so I was like, well, I'll go check them out. It's probably some bachelor bulls bedded down. Maybe I can sneak into them. And so I walk around there, and I get like set up in this little spot off this trail, and I hear them bugling. And then all of a sudden the bugles get a little more intense, and they kind of start moving around and kind of seeming like they're going further away. I was like, well, shoot, like they're moving. Like I might as well go in there with them. And I think one of my saving graces on that day, on why I was even able to get into that bull, is because it had rained the day before. So the ground was soft. Leaves were soft. Because there was like no wind or anything. It was dead silent. And so I go in there super quietly. I hear this bull just screaming his guts out. And I was so concentrated on getting into this bull that I wasn't even recognizing his bugle. And it was him. But I had no idea it was him the whole time because I was so concentrated on trying to get into this herd. And so I'm on this trail, and this bull's bugling probably 50 yards below me. And so I try and sneak off this trail a little bit, and it's like super thick, and I'm just taking my time. And I'm standing there, and then all of a sudden I look over, I see an ear twitch on the side of my vision, and I look over, and there's cows bedded down like 30 yards by me. I'm like, shoot. I'm just standing there looking at them, and one's kind of looking at me, didn't really know what I was, and she kind of like 5 minutes later looked away, and like at the same time this bull's screaming just right in front of me. And so I like started my GoPro. And so I got some fun footage of him bugling, 30 yards from me and clunking and just getting all pissed and riled up. And it was so like hard because these cows were right here. So I was trying to be so quiet, but I wanted to shoot this bull. And for a second, I thought he was going to come right to me. He started coming up through that brush right in front of me. And then I kind of seen a piece of him, and I seen I think it was his right side, I believe, his sixth side. And I just was like, that's a big bull. I just saw the back end, and I was like, oh my gosh, and my heart started racing because I was calm the whole time until I saw that back end. And he kind of like moved around a little bit, and then he came out right in front of me about 30 yards. I could see bits and pieces of him, and he kind of walked down and bedded down right in front of me. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. He just bedded right down. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm stuck between this herd of elk that are bedding. Like it's just an insane situation. And so these cows, I'm like, well, shoot, I don't know what to do. So I kind of backed out for a second back on the trail. I was like, no, I need to get back in there. So I get back in there, and I am literally taking the slowest steps I have ever made in my entire life. And I had seen this little window that I think would possibly work if I could get to it, where I could shoot through it and hit the bull. And I had to be really careful about watching the cows, watching the bull, and watching my feet all at one time, because I could see his ears, and his ears would turn back when he'd hear me, and he'd kind of do this, and I would just stop, And so I did that for probably a good 10, 15 minutes. Finally got to this little spot, like literally moved 3 steps, but it took me that long to move. There's like probably a little 12 by 12 openings through the bushes, and I could just see the top of his shoulder as he's bedded down. And I thought about shooting, through the trees. I'm like, no, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. I really don't want to risk missing my opportunity on this bull. But I'm like, if he stands up, like that's going to be a perfect hole right where his vitals are. And so I'm sitting there just thinking, like, should I make a noise? Should I do something? I just wasn't really sure what to do, but I needed to stand up. And while I was thinking that, one of the calves that was bedded with the couch, she got up and got nervous and ran down past the bull. And I'm like, this is perfect. And they all start getting up and moving down. And he's just looking at him, watching him come down, not thinking anything of it. He bugles out of his bed. And then they all move down behind him. And he's looking at him, and he's like, okay, I'll get up. And as soon as I seen his head go back and his butt go up, I drew back right as he did that. And right as I had pulled back, he was completely standing up, and I just sent it right where those vitals were. And I just went running. And I just sat there, and I was just like, holy crap, that was insane. And I just sat there for a good half hour, just like taking the moment. noticed my GoPro had glitched, so it like lost everything
from
me shooting him and him running off. So that's unfortunate, but I sat there for a long time. I was like, that looked like him, but I wasn't sure. Gave him a good 45 minutes and then started tracking. That's when I found out he was standing in that, or bedded in that same spot I was standing in and all the waypoint stuff. And I began tracking. And like, before I began tracking, I could smell him. Like you could, just, I don't know if you kind of know the smell of like a rusky, like rutted up bull. So I like knew he was there, but like my mind was also like, what if he's not, the whole thing that happens when you're hunting. And so I start tracking and walking down and just went straight downhill. And at first the blood was a little like nothing too crazy, but all of a sudden it just like, this was a dead bull for sure. And I found him like 100 yards just down the hill. And it was just the most craziest thing. And it was so thick. It was above my head. You could see just pieces of hair. And coming around that last little bush, you just saw his antlers sticking up. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And it was the most craziest experience. Like, I didn't know if it was him yet until I looked around and saw his blind eye. And I'm like, that is him. But what are the chances that I ended up sneaking into him while, during their bedding time of the day? It was 11 o'clock or something, and it ended up being him of all bulls. And so I thought that was just absolutely bizarre that it happened the way it did. It's just the most like craziest, like meant to happen hunt that I've had, I think. And so that's just why it was so special to me. And not only that, but you think like an old bull wouldn't taste very good. He's probably the best tasting bull I've ever had in my life. He's so tender cool. And just so good. Like his whole body was layered in like 3 inches of fat. I've never seen a bull that fatty in my life. I have a video of it that that'll be on the story, but it's just absolutely insane. That was just an incredible hunt that I will cherish forever. So
unreal.
It was pretty dang cool.
I mean, that is crazy. Yeah. Like you say, like he like put on like, an old bull like that, like putting on a ton more antler, but then also being so fat. It's like, you wonder, like, did he find like a different spot to be or some like egg land that he just lived on for a year and fattened up or what?
And even that was actually one of my questions is like, you've kind of hunted this thing, like you found him like year after year. I mean, did you kind of like, I guess maybe talk about his home range? Like how big was that? Was he traveling a lot or was he a homebody?
So this is something really cool too. So when I found out that he had come back and I had videos of him in the velvet, I posted a photo from him the year before on my story. And this guy messaged me and he's like, hey, that looks like this bull. And he sent me a video of him in June of that year I killed him, just the drop south of where I had gotten videos of him. So he had actually been moving north the whole time. And so it's super cool because now I got this other video, this whole minute-long video of him with a little shorter in the velvet. And he's just like in a wallow. And that was super cool. So I got an idea of where he was coming from because where I ended up killing him was even more north from where I had gotten cameras of pictures of him. It was about 3 miles more north. And so that was his rutting area is where I ended up killing him. But he summers. So I'm believing he headed south for the winter. And then he actually moved his way up through his velvet, time growing his velvet. By the time he's done shedding, he'd be, where he was supposed to be during the rut. And so it was I'm pretty sure all summer he was just moving north. But the whole area is completely like thick vegetation, but so much green. And I feel like this spot in particular does have quite a bit of water, even in drought years, which helps. And the first time I had gotten photos of him, he was still a very healthy looking bull. Like he was just fat and just very well rounded. And so he just was a very particularly healthy animal. Like he just was able to take out, like he must have just had a really nice calm life. And even though the years I know he's been hunted, I know he's been hunted in that spot because the spot I hunted them in is crazy overpopulated with hunters. It's one of the most popular spots in Idaho. And so I know he's been chased his whole life. Yeah, he was just a very healthy bull. And so, just the terrain is incredibly, I guess, well for feed and water. And so I think that's just why he stayed so well. I don't know why he put on the inches he did. The year after he looked so tiny and regressed, but he did. So it was super crazy. But just an incredibly beautiful bull because he even grew a 7 side. He was a 6x6, and then he grew into a 6x7, which is really interesting. So
unreal.
Yeah. It was just wild.
Yeah. And then, like maybe talk a little bit, like obviously super pumped when you killed them, all that stuff. But I would imagine the mountain kind of feels a little bit more empty knowing that like this bull that you'd kind of chased like year after year. What'd that kind of feel like?
That is actually a very true thing. I had one of the most weirdest like feelings walking up to him. You know, like it was a feeling of accomplishment and like all these things, but at the same time it was a very bittersweet feeling for that exact reason. Like this has been the monarch of this mountain for years. Like I know for a fact he's been the herd bull, you know, and I had a friend who had hunted him a few years prior also. He's like, I know I hunted that bull, his people's the same, like all this stuff. And so it was actually really kind of a bittersweet feeling to know that this bull's not up there anymore, that has just been ruling this area. But at the same time, I look into the perspective of as the older he gets, the harder it's going to be for him to live. You know, he's going to start starving and not being able to keep up with the herd. You know, the winters are going to be hard on him. He's susceptible to many predators. And I think going out in a way he didn't know what happens, and he's being respected and, you know, being used. Like I am using his meat. I'm going to mount him because I love him so much. I think that's such a respect to that animal. And so at the same time, it's very sad knowing that he's not there anymore. But at the same time, I'm very grateful that I was the one to give him the beautiful death, like a beautiful way out where he knows no pain. You know, he just was rotten being an awesome bull, and then he's just, you know, like peacefully gone. And so I think that's also very special to me that I was able to be the one to do that for him. But it was a very weird feeling walking up to him being like, wow, this bull is just such a king of this area, if you want to call it. And so it was a very interesting thing. But I think that's why he's also so special to me, is just the fact that, you know, I knew he was that macho man in that area for a long time. So
yeah, it is interesting to think about that, you know, something that's been so much a part of, you know, the mountain for you. And then like now it's like you know, this incredible thing happens, but then like also something is, you know, gone, or I mean still there, but there in a different way, but gone in a certain way. And like you said, I mean, bittersweet is probably the best way to describe that.
But I think that's what makes this design so cool, is like what you just described, like the whole story. Every hunter, whether you're an elk hunter, a deer hunter, whatever, that is like the experience that everyone is kind of chasing, like that, something like that, and this culminates. It's so cool. And I think just the fact that, like, you know, what with the design going back to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, like the proceeds from it, I think that's awesome. Kind of showed like the connection of obviously such a special bull to you, but then actually giving back to the organization that's like first and foremost with elk, I think is awesome. So, I mean, if people are listening to this on this date, you know, Tuesday the 25th of October, you know, head to the website right now, because these things are going to be on the website for a short amount of time. There's not a ton of them.
Limited run.
Yeah, we do have these awesome decals as well, but once these shirts are gone, they're kind of gone, you know, which is the, you know, get them while the getting's good is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just like the elk, you know, these shirts will be gone soon.
That was very eloquently put. but yeah, I mean.
But to put it a different way, one thing going back to when you were talking about, you know, the hunt and reflecting on the hunt, to put it, you know, a way better way. But when I look at this art, though, like you've been reflecting on this hunt, and I can tell, like, with your passion about it, like how fondly you think of those memories and how you can just think about it and it brings you back to that place. And this art, like, you think of, like, you know, you take a lot of photos if you're successful, right? You're like, oh, you get this shot and that shot, and, you know, maybe you're documenting the entire experience as a whole. But this part, to me, like, it may seem like, to me, like, this is the ultimate part of reflection, because this is the culmination of everything. Like, the hunt is essentially over, the work is done, you've got the bull back to the truck, and it's kind of like that moment that you sit back and you're just like, oh, wow. Like, you almost finally get to take it in. You know? And so and that's what I think is so cool about this piece. So
yeah, I totally
I definitely agree. That was basically my thought process when I took that photo, is, you know, that's just like, this is the end to the story. And like, how cool is that? So I think that's why I ended up drawing that particular piece, like that photo I took from the hunt, because it's just literally a little kind of remembrance of the hunt. You know, everyone wants to have, you know, their animal in the bed of the pickup truck on their way home. Like that's every like hunter's goal. And so I think that's why it was so special to me. But this bull wasn't just any bull to me either. He was a very special one. But yeah, so I think that's kind of what my thought process was behind that little design there. And it's super fun because it's almost like one of my art prints, but on a shirt instead. It's a limited edition art print, but it's on a t-shirt, so or a long sleeve. And so I think that's really fun. You know?
Super cool.
I love it.
I think people are going to be pretty jacked about this. So, I mean, Lydia, is there where would you want people to go to kind of like find out more about you, what you got going on, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I mainly stay most active on Instagram, with my handle being at Lydia Smith 00. I need to be a little better with my art one, which is Lydia_Smith_art. Those are both on Instagram, and you can also find it on Facebook. And then my YouTube, I am growing. So my first video, luckily, was the video of this bull on YouTube. So it's titled the Callisto Bull. That's what I ended up naming him. And a fun thing behind Callisto is the third largest moon in our solar system. And it's a very beautiful moon, and his eye resembled a moon. And so that is why I named him that. So I'm going to be doing more videos, hopefully. And just Lydia Smith 00, I believe, or Ivory Peaks. You can kind of find my Instagram channel through one of those handles as well. So,
Super
my YouTube.
Awesome. Well, I'd say, check out Lydia's Instagram. Check out her art page. Like I said, Lydia, I'm always just astounded whenever I look at your work, and
Thank you.
Truly a talent. So it's just anybody who's interested in amazing wildlife art, definitely check that out. And also get yourself a limited run t-shirt benefiting
get
the
them while
Rocky
the
Mountain
getting's good.
Elk Foundation. Get them now. Get them while they're hot.
Which is super cool.
Yeah.
I think it's so awesome that it benefits the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, especially for me too, because my favorite wild game animal is elk. Always will be. And so very special to me in that part too.
Well, we're stoked to work together on this thing. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Like here it is, August, and we're recording this thing, and not going out for a few months. So and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's been a whole lot of stuff to kind of get to this moment. So obviously a long-winded way of just saying, like, we appreciate the heck out of it. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So, well, Lydia, thank you for this amazing story. Thank you for this amazing art. Thanks for taking the time to visit with us and tell the story. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And like I said, buy a t-shirt. We'll catch you on the next one.